Now, police are claiming that the suspect in the Clapham chemical attack may have jumped into the River Thames as the manhunt continues. I say manhunt, they're now really focusing on finding a body. Now, they're that sure of this. This is what the Metropolitan Police Commander John Saville said yesterday.
The last 24 hours, we have meticulously been viewing all of the available CCTV in and around the Chelsea Bridge area. And we've also worked with Transport for London in accessing the CCTV from their buses. It is our now main working theory that Ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge. We are in contact with his family in order to pass that news on and to provide the necessary information and support for them, because of course I'm sure they will also be very worried about what's happened to him and what he has done.
Well, of course, all of this comes after officers did raid 2 Tyneside properties on Thursday, thought to be connected to the attack. Ezedi, of course, is wanted for attempted murder after throwing that chemical substance on a woman, 31-year-old woman, and her 2 children. And, by the way, injuring 9 other people too.
Oh, dear. Well, what do you make of all of this? Is it the police? Is it a cop-out from the police and we can't find him, therefore he must have gone into the river? Or is it a bit more solid than that? Let's talk to former police officer Harry Tangye. Good to see you this morning, Harry. But what's your assessment of this? You know how these things work.
Yeah, I've been following quite carefully, and yeah, I've heard things like, well, you know, you can hide in London. No, you can't. If you're the most famous individual with a facial injury like he has in London, I don't think you'd be able to move an inch. And I think what I do know is that London is probably one of the most covered with CCTV in the world. And I also know, you just mentioned those buses. Now, I've worked with buses within fatal road traffic collisions. They are incredibly detailed and clear CCTV on all areas of the buses. And you know how many buses there are in London. So I'm absolutely convinced now that Ezedi, as was stated by Mr. Saville there, that he was walking with with purpose. It's only a 36-minute walk, but 4 hours later, he turns up on Clapham Bridge, walking with purpose. And then he's walking to and fro in the centre of the bridge. And then he's last seen looking over the edge of the bridge. I think we have to say the hypothesis, as we would have said, is very much that is what he's done, because he hasn't disappeared into thin air unless he has scaled, you know, like Spider-Man, a building, of which they were sort of hinting at. Now, if he has gone into the river, then you're talking about 3 to 5 days before a body raises, not getting too much detail, but it's all the gases and things. But I was working, a few years ago, I was with the Marine Department in Newcastle, which ironically is where Ezedi was living at before this. And they said they often pick up bodies very near the bridge where people jump off, and they get snagged in, again, not in too much detail, but there's a lot of debris in the bottom of the riverbed, and bodies very easily get snagged, and they might not travel very far. But if they do, you're literally talking about the sea, and you may never recover that body at all. That's very realistic.
I imagine, though, the police divers who will be recruited for this search are very used to the Thames, and they'll know, won't they, what the likelihoods are, what the probabilities are of a body being snagged, as you say, or moving about. It's very tidal, the river there, and so, you know, the water raises 8, 12 feet sometimes. So, but they'll know the river so well, won't they?
Yes, Anne, and I'm in awe of these divers. I mean, they are absolute. Sometimes I wonder if they're human, because they are working against horrendous currents, and often when you're literally a metre above the riverbed, it's black. You can't see your hand in front of your face, and sometimes they say you actually put the dials against their masks to see what they are. So it's all touch, and that's not a very pleasant job, but it's all touch at certain levels. And so they will have a grid process where they are searching. Don't think for a second you're going down there and it's like being in the Mediterranean. You've got a clear view and you can see all around you. It's just not the case. It's a very difficult job.
The problem with this is, I mean, we've talked to several former police officers today, Harry, and they're all agreeing with what you're saying. They're all sure that Ezedi is dead, is in the river somewhere. The problem is, it still leaves it slightly open-ended, doesn't it? Particularly for the victims in this. They will never quite know unless a body is recovered.
Yeah, I mean, people want closure, don't they? And I think the public are watching something going on, and they are detached from it. They have great empathy with the woman and the children involved, and even the police officers who are injured. But if we're quite frank, people can often want the film to end, and they want a conclusion because that's what we're used for. And we are detached from the reality of what actually is being suffered by these individuals. And so I worked with many fatal road traffic collisions, and it wasn't always finding out who was at fault, but why and what happened. So there was closure. And so the police will be really working hard for that, because that is so important for the people involved, especially the mother and the two children, without a shadow of a doubt. But yeah, I think everything's looking towards that way. He was so injured, he would have needed to sought help. He would have been in absolute agony. And I don't think he was the sort of individual, from what we've heard, that would warrant this huge backup by colleagues to get him out of the country and all these things that have been mentioned. He's just some guy who did an awful thing. And I think that's human nature. He felt there was no way out. He was in a lot of pain. He thought about it for a moment and then he disappeared.
OK, Harry Tan, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, and I hope for the sake of the victims, it's a terrible thing to find yourself saying, but I do hope that if he did go in the river, I hope they find his body.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that at least they'll know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, for that sense of closure. But so the reality is, will they ever find him? But I know there will be people watching and listening right now. Some of our guests on the QT have said, "Oh, I don't believe it. I don't. It's just the police covering themselves." Actually, when you speak to all We've spoken to so many this morning, so many very, very experienced police. And decades behind them. They're all saying, yeah, he's dead. He's dead. So I think you've got to take some comfort.
And it's interesting, even in that little bit of video we showed, where you could see him crossing the road and going towards the bridge, a bus went past there. And so the police will have tracked that bus down, looked at its video.
And he must have been in, actually, a tremendous amount of pain with that burn.
He must have been, although in the sequences we've seen, the little CCTV grabs that we've seen, he doesn't walk as though he's in terrible pain. No, but it's mystifying, isn't it?
But you sort of wonder if it takes a while to kick in. It's a bit like people say, if you get shot, it doesn't hurt to begin with. You know, your body, your adrenaline and everything, all just covers it all up.
Yeah. You can't tell, can you? You can't.
You can't tell, but, you know...
I just hope for the sake of the victims they get some sort of closure on this.
Let's hope so. They've still got an awful lot to go through.
Yeah.
Especially the mother in all of this.
And I don't like the idea of her. She's got such a recovery ahead of her. And it is said that she'll lose the sight in one eye. And goodness only knows what that sort of horrible chemical attack has done to her face. She's got to live with that. She doesn't need the fear as well of thinking he's still around.
No, absolutely.